All right, well, welcome again for another OSHA Quick Take with Conn Maciel Carey. Today we're going to be talking about preparing and managing for a Cal OSHA inspection. The full webinar will be Wednesday, August 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific time or 1 p.m. Eastern, and we'll have a link for that webinar below. Cal OSHA has emerged from the pandemic with new tools, resources, and energy for enforcement efforts. As the agency increases its inspections and implements more thorough inspection strategies, it's more important than ever for employers to be prepared for the Cal OSHA inspections. So today we've got Rachel, Megan, and Sam here to kind of tell us what you're going to cover off in the webinar on the 21st.
Thanks, Scott. As Scott mentioned, Cal OSHA is one of the most aggressive state plans, or I would say the most aggressive state plan in the country. And so it's certainly a little, high stakes in terms of inspections. And so it's really one that if you get your inspection right, get tools in place to help manage those, can really save you in terms of potential citations. And anybody who has dealt with Cal OSHA knows that it's its own beast. And so part of this webinar is not only are we going to go through best practices, but best practices for Cal OSHA inspections and all of their particular nuances. This is going to be even more important that you get these procedures in place and have training and employees prepared for it, because Cal OSHA has recently announced that they are going to be implementing egregious classifications and enterprise-wide classifications for employers. So again, these inspections are going to take on even more of a significant role in this process. And particularly since we know that although Cal OSHA has been understaffed and is still understaffed, that they're really trying to ramp up how many inspectors that they do have. And so we would anticipate additional inspections as that ramps up. So what are the things that we're going to talk about? We're going to start off by going through what an employer's goal should be during a Cal OSHA inspection and best practices for that. So how are you setting up your policies and procedures? How do folks know what to do when an inspector arrives? How are you controlling that flow of information? And of course, your business continues during an inspection. So how to minimize that disruption and how to identify potential problems early so that they can be mitigated before they become citations. We'll also review what Cal OSHA's rights are, what employees' rights are, and what you as the employer's inspections rights are. So it's really important for the employer to understand what your rights are, and the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. And this also becomes even more important, as my colleague Sam about a little later, as the worker walk-around rule starts to get implemented, and you may potentially have third parties on your sites. So what is your strategy around that as well? And my colleague Megan can walk us through some additional topics that we're going to hit on this webinar.
Thanks, Rachel. One of the things that's really common when we get a call from somebody who an OSHA has just shown up is the sense of urgency that it causes when an inspector shows up, and having a good understanding of each stage of the Cal OSHA inspection and what to expect can help calm nerves and help people think straight and remember what their procedures are for handling an inspection. So we'll go through each of those stages, things like the opening conference, the first conversation you have with the inspector, understanding the scope of the inspection, making sure that understanding why they're there and what they're trying to accomplish, and then we'll talk through the document production, which Cal OSHA will often turn over a document request sheet with asking for a number of documents. We'll go over what particular documents you should expect to need to gather, as well as the time frame. There's some difference in, how quickly you might provide the OSHA 300 logs versus, how much time the inspector might give you to gather up all of your training or inspection documentation, for example. And then we'll give some tips for the actual walk around of the facility. We'll also go over kind of what it looks like when OSHA requests to interview employees, and some of the differences and nuance between interviewing employees and interviewing supervisory level employees, and what rights and obligations exist in those categories. And then, we'll go over what happens kind of at the other end of the inspection with the closing conference, when Cal OSHA sometimes gives employers an idea of what citations they may decide to issue and what the appeals process looks like, as well as setting you up for success in terms of strategies that you can implement for what do we do next, right? How do you make the decision about whether to appeal? How do you analyze the citation package when it comes out? How do you, make sure that you receive that citation package timely, so you can keep an eye on your appeal deadline, which is very, very strict in under the Cal OSHA regulations and appeals board decisions. So make sure you build as much time and thought as possible into how to manage the inspection.
So we'll also talk about kind of Cal OSHA's record keeping and recording requirements. And this is an especially important topic, especially as Cal OSHA, as Rachel mentioned earlier, Cal OSHA starts to ramp up its enforcement of worker walkaround, a potential worker walkaround rule, workplace violence, indoor heat, all of these new programs and standards that the agency has put out that require written plans. And so you'll want to make sure that at the beginning of these inspections that those plans are available for the inspector, and we'll talk about strategies for how to go about that. We'll also discuss some developments in warrants, in Cal OSHA's ability to go to court and request an inspection warrant if you decline to consent to the inspection, and sort of talk about some developments in what the appeals board has said about those warrants and some strategies for employers to attack those warrants and potentially invalidate them. Lastly, we'll cover the federal worker walkaround rule, which at this point is just a part of OSHA, but which will be coming inevitably to California, as the feds have required all state plan states to adopt a similar or more effective rule. Cal OSHA has already indicated that the rule they intend to adopt will not be identical to the OSHA rule. So we'll talk about some potential requirements that California will impose on top of the OSHA requirements.
Great. Well, thank you, Rachel, Sam, and Megan, for joining today. Again, the webinar will be on preparing for and managing for OSHA or Cal OSHA inspection, and it's Wednesday, August 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern. And again, we'll have a link for that to register for that full webinar in the description below. Thanks again for joining.